If only Hamas lays down its weapons and releases the Israeli captives, the war on Gaza could end and the besieged coastal territory would be transformed into Singapore 2.0, or at least that is what we are being repeatedly told.
Now, of course, what happened after October 7th could have ended immediately if Hamas had stopped hiding behind civilians, released the hostages, and put down its weapons.
Unconditional surrender, release the hostages. We get a ceasefire right now.
This conflict would be over within a matter of hours if Hamas released the remaining hostages and agreed to surrender or lay down its weapons.
Now, despite how many times it may be repeated by US politicians and on the Western corporate media, the Israeli leadership themselves continually stress that even in the event of a ceasefire and the return of the captives, the war will continue. In addition to this, polling data suggests that roughly around half of the Israeli public support reoccupying the Gaza Strip after the war, and that number rises to 70% amongst Israeli right-wingers. While 4 in 10 Israelis back re-establishing illegal settlements inside the territory, Pew Research data suggests that only 9% of Israeli Jews believe that the people of Gaza should decide who governs them. The reason the views of the Israeli public are important here is because their far-right government appears to be acting upon them. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly opposed the idea of allowing the Palestinian Authority, which it cooperates with in the West Bank, to replace Hamas rule in a post-war Gaza. This is because it could bring about a situation in which Israel would be pressured to allow the creation of a Palestinian state, which the Israeli Knesset voted against ever allowing earlier this year. While Netanyahu is opting to form a coalition of foreign Arab states that have normalized ties with Israel to operate Gaza in collaboration with a local force of collaborators, Israeli settler leaders have been organizing conferences and drafting plans for the resettlement of Gaza. This, as Israel's security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir himself supports reoccupying and settlement expansion inside the besieged coastal territory. Aside from this, Hamas also has a direct historical example of what happens when you strike an agreement with Israel to lay down your arms. Although today the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, has embassies and diplomatic missions around the world, even signing agreements with Israel, it was once treated as a terrorist organization, and in 1982 the Israeli military invaded Lebanon in order to destroy it. Israel killed up to 20,000 Palestinians and Lebanese, the majority of whom were civilians. After besieging the PLO and its leadership in Beirut for 2 months, the Palestinian resistance agreed to lay down their arms and flee to Tunisia. Following the expulsion of the fighters and leaders, Israeli forces presided over massacres of defenseless Palestinian refugees, the most infamous case being that of the Sabra and Shatila massacre, during which around 3,500 were murdered in only 2 days. Since the fighters fled, there was nothing the PLO could do but watch in horror as the atrocities unfolded. The Israeli military would also go on to illegally occupy southern Lebanon too, using a local Lebanese collaborator force known as the South Lebanon Army. This was all done under an Israeli government that would be labeled as moderate when compared to today's far-right coalition. Hamas has also witnessed what the Israeli government has done in the West Bank since the conclusion of the Second Intifada uprising in 2005, with the further expansion of settlements and the recruitment of the Palestinian Authority security forces to thwart attempts at expelling the occupation forces from the territory. While the West Bank-based authority played along with Israel's requests, arresting its own people and protecting illegal settlers for Israel, then entering fruitless dialogue on possible peace deals, the Gaza Strip continued to resist. In 2005, the Israeli government decided to withdraw its forces from inside Gaza, also removing its illegal settlements, due to the hostile environment created by constant armed attacks against their forces, opting to occupy the territory from its perimeter instead of internally. If Hamas lays down its weapons and hands over the Israeli captives, every piece of evidence points towards chaos, devastation, massacres, settlements, and occupation.